One. All right. Welcome to Vibe Osmosis. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, man. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for asking. Go ahead and introduce yourself and what you do.
My name is Josh. I'm most often known as Deacon in the band Animal Collective.
And how long have you been making music, would you say?
I mean, my earliest memories are making music. I started making music with Noah when I was, and we were like in music kind of groups together when we were pretty young. We met when we were 8 or 9 years old and did a lot of music in the school that we went to. And then we both got guitars and started writing our own songs and got a hold of like a multi-track cassette recorder when we were 12, I think. And so we started making our own kind of original music around that age, 12 years old or so. So, but
Now,
I'd
now, um,
already
one,
kind of been like, yeah, like just through having, yeah.
yeah, one of the things that I've heard of you playing with Noah is the recordings of you in Tokyo in 2004.
Hmm.
Um,
Yep.
how did that come to be?
That was actually supposed to be an Animal Collective tour. It was going to be, I'm actually not sure if Brian was able to do it, but it was sort of during what would that have been, to early 2002. That was sort of like the beginning of what would have, or what became the Here Comes the Indian era of music. Is that right? Dude, yeah. No, we were there in 2000, early 2004. I'm sorry. That would have been the beginning of the Feels era of music. But we hadn't really started working on stuff. I think like the three or four of us had started jamming some of like very early versions of Feel stuff, but it hadn't really come together. And I think something came up for Dave, and he didn't feel like he actually. So we'd already kind of planned the trip, and maybe even bought the plane tickets, or maybe at least just committed to it. And Dave was unable to do it kind of at the last minute. So Noah and I kind of had about like, I think it was literally like 2 weeks to just be like, we're gonna go. We don't know what we're gonna do. We didn't feel like, a lot of the songs we had at that point were songs Dave sang, so we couldn't really do those. So we just kind of threw stuff together. I honestly don't remember. I haven't listened to that recording probably since around the time we went, and I don't remember any of it other than that I know we did a version of "Learning How to Dive," which was
Yeah.
a Noah jam that came out later. But yeah, we just kind of we just kind of threw it together, and it was a very whirlwind experience. We were both pretty drunk most of the time, I think, but having a good time. Like it just was a really like very wild alien experience, and felt pretty crazy to be there, but just tried to make the best of it. And yeah.
Okay, so do you believe in like a parallel universe?
I don't not believe in a parallel universe. I don't honestly spend a lot of time like contemplating those types of things. I feel like when I have conversations with people about that sort of thing, it makes sense to me. Maybe it's in the same way that like when I don't feel I've had any like direct experience of extraterrestrials, for example, but the idea of a universe as vast as the one we live in that does not have those seems insane to me. So I just assume, but I don't have any like direct thought or thinking that has to do with parallel universe realities. But the theory of it makes sense to me, and kind of the reality of infinity that we actually are somehow intertwined in it. It makes sense to me, but I haven't spent a lot of time, yeah, with
So,
those ideas.
so would you rather fight like a crazy big bear, or would you rather fight like a big tiger that was after you?
I think I would pick the bear. I feel like that somehow, for some reason in my mind, a bear I would have some sort of a chance with, and a tiger, I just think yeah. I mean, I think in both cases I'm dead. There's no question I'm dead meat, but somehow the bear feels like a little bit more manageable.
So, how do you feel about like survivalist type of movies? Do you kind of go for like this action thrillers,
Uh,
a little bit weird?
yeah, no, I dig movies like that. Yeah, I definitely am. I don't want to say a sucker, but I definitely like a good Hollywood action movie. When it's done well, I'm pretty in. Give me like a John Wick or a Minority Report,
Yeah.
anything with Keanu Reeves. I'm in. And yeah, I mean, the road. I mean, anything that's kind of Mad Max, like all that stuff. If it's done well, I'm pretty stoked. So.
Yeah. Have you watched anything recently that you'd shout out or recommend?
I would say in general, any question you ask me that's of that type, whatever my particular form of neurodivergence or ADD is, I start hearing just crackling. So I'd have to like think about what I've even like. I can't even remember what I've seen recently, let alone give you something that I've seen that I actually particularly liked, which I know is not a cool answer for an interview. But what have I seen recently that was pretty sweet? Uh, yeah, I don't know, man. It's yeah. Sorry. Yeah, awful for an interview, but I'm blank. I'm blank.
One of the ones that
It's a weird thing. If you ask me what like my favorite color is, or like what
yeah,
songs I'm into, or even what I've been listening to in the last week, I'll just like it's just yeah, blue screen.
it's like yeah, like there has been stuff that I've been listening to or watching, but I can't say like any of it's like I want to be like that. You need to watch that one. One of the ones I think I've seen is Late Night with the Devil. Have you heard about this one?
I heard about it. I haven't seen it yet. I'm kind of curious about it. Yeah, you dug
This
it?
one, yeah, this one I thought it was very interesting because I didn't expect the setup to be like you're following like an event and how like things should flow in action. And
Uh,
like it took me by surprise on like the development on like, your take on spirituality and like how you question things. So
uh,
one of the questions I think I have is like, have you ever experienced anything spiritual yourself?
oh yeah, quite a bit. I've spent I mean on multiple different levels, some of which just has to do with like internal feeling states and kind of sense of spirituality. I've had some kind of unexplainable uh, by yeah like sort of events or experiences in my life that certainly feel like they're touching on spirit realm, especially around like dream experiences and death. I've had a few kind of things that were related to that, and people, sort of other creatures or people passing away and having dreams in conjunction with that seems sort of kind of unexplainable to me. But
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Outside of like working on music, what's something that you enjoy doing?
Um, well, I spend a lot of time doing carpentry as well I mean, as a form of work. It's one of the ways to earn money, but I do quite enjoy being a carpenter.
Yeah,
It's something that I've been sort of got into in my early 20s and has been something I've come back to quite a bit for the last 26 years or however old I am now.
yeah,
Um, I don't know. I spend a lot of time reading. I like being in nature. I like going to movies, despite the fact that I can't remember anything I've seen recently. Hanging with friends, but a lot of my life, to be honest, is yeah, pretty centered around music. That's it's definitely like I'm either going to shows or I'm playing piano at home or I'm in the studio working on a project. So that is, and I guess I feel um, not that it's like this straightforward, but I feel very blessed and lucky that this thing that I sort of found and became pretty clear about when I was like 12, 13 years old is, I mean, yeah, I don't know if you're like, I've just kind of finished producing and mixing the most recent Panda Bear record. So Noah and I have been like spending a lot of time together for the last 4 or 5 months.
okay,
And throughout that time, multiple times, both of us would sort of sometimes remark and just be like, wow, it's crazy. Like we're doing exactly the same thing we've been doing since we were 12 or 13 years old. And it's sort of like I always wanted to do it because of how much I love doing it and how much it
yeah,
means to me.
right.
And it's sort of crazy that here I am, you know, 30 years later and it's what I do. And some of the things obviously have been very successful in ways of supporting myself, and a lot of it is not and hasn't been, and it's still just kind of what I like doing more than most things. So
Yeah. Out of
yeah.
like out of your travels with your own music with like Sleep Cycle, like what's some of the favorite places that you played at?
Oh man, there's so many places. I mean, going to Mali was definitely a pretty extraordinary experience. It was a very like high anxiety time in my life, so it was a very trippy, in a kind of a dark way experience, but it was a very remarkable thing. I played a show in Timbuktu. I mean, it's like what that seems like a crazy thing to say. And there was a lot of things about
Yeah.
just being there that were really remarkable. I don't know, to be honest, a lot of the places that I remember playing and really digging, I don't even know if I fully remember like where they were. I remember like a show we played in Eastern Europe that was, I think, in Romania, that was like in kind of like an old, seemed like sort of like an old warehouse, maybe kind of like spiritual churchy place, but that was run by some sort of noise collective and just had like a really cool vibe and the people were really cool. Um, What else has been cool? I mean, I loved going to New Zealand. That was like a really special experience. The only shows there's only two shows that we played there, and they were perfectly fine. I wouldn't say they like stood out as remarkable shows. They were, I mean, they were good, but
Yeah.
being in New Zealand was pretty incredible. That's a pretty amazing and remarkable place to be.
About
Yeah, I don't know.
about this music that you're working on right now, like where are you guys recording this? Or like are you allowed to
No,
say
well,
location wise?
Noah's stuff is done. We actually just approved the masters last week, so Noah's record is done. We recorded,
Oh, okay.
95% of it in Lisbon. I went over to Lisbon in last kind of November, December, and spent like a month
Okay.
tracking the record with him there, and then came back to the States and kind of did all the mixing and sort of post recording production work in my studio in Baltimore. And then he came and spent like a week here, sort of like the final touches. We did a little bit more overdubbing and finishing up the mixes. But yeah, it's done. It's in the can. It's ready to go. So,
What
but
is
my studio is in. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, what was like the process of recording some of that stuff, if you're allowed to say?
I think I'm allowed to say. I mean, it's pretty early because I don't think the record's probably going to come out until early next year.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll do a lot more press around it then. But it was, he had demoed a bunch of songs, had a bunch of song ideas, and he sent them to me, and we sort of, would talk about. I mean, he had a pretty clear idea of what he wanted to do, but gave enough options that we could sort of pick and choose together. And there was definitely certain things that I was like, I think we really got to do this one, man. And so we sort of like found the songs that made the most sense, and then he really wanted to approach it by recording all the instrumentation in a very stripped down way of really focusing on just like guitar, bass guitar and drums and like percussion and singing, and have that be the foundational tracks of everything. And then we had a lot of ideas about how we would sort of manipulate that stuff and morph it moving forward. And in some cases, I think we did quite a bit of that. And in other cases, in a lot of ways, it ended up becoming a pretty like raw in its own way kind of guitar, bass, drum sort of record. It has a very kind of I don't know, like early rock kind of feeling to it in an interesting way. I
Nice.
mean, I think it is a lot more sonic than that, but that was kind of a lot of the, yeah, that's the instrumentation almost exclusively. There's, a handful of synths and pianos and stuff, but it's almost all guitar, bass, and drums and singing. So,
Now, do you remember like the first song that you recorded on piano?
that I recorded on piano.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I've been sort of like playing or writing ideas for piano since I was like a little kid, 6 or 7. I mean, I'm trying to remember. I actually feel like when we first started recording a lot, when we were kids, like 13 through high school, I don't actually know if piano really was a big thing. I think that's when I was really like interested in guitar and keyboards and stuff. Oh, I do remember. Yeah, you know what? I found like an old, like at a like a Goodwill or a shop or something, like some sort of old electric piano, like no name. Like I don't think it still wouldn't be worth anything today, but had a really cool like electric keys sound to it. And I remember a handful of songs, both that like me and Noah did, a couple that I remember like almost could hear the melody in my head and like the keyboard part. And then I remember doing one with Dave as well that incorporated that one quite a bit. So maybe that's the earliest like piano-y kind of like recording I can recall.
Yeah. And like what drove you to like doing piano for like the most recent stuff that you've been doing?
It's an instrument I've always really loved a lot, and for whatever reason, in Animal Collective, I think that guitar was really my focus for kind of like from early 2000s up through Centipede Hurts. Occasionally, I would have a keyboard around, but it just for some reason never felt like the right thing. And then I think in 2013 or 14, like post Centipede Hurts, I got a studio space and really wanted to get an upright piano. So I just found like a free, you can get pianos free really pretty easily. So I found like on Craigslist, like a free piano and just went and picked it up.
Nice.
And I
Yeah.
just remembered that I really loved playing piano. And I think starting then it just started to become increasingly like a thing that I most often when I go into my studio, like that's what I do is I sit down and I play at piano. And I think for a long time that just felt like a way to I really like improvising on the piano. Like I can improvise on the piano much better than I can improvise on guitar or anything else. So it's like a kind of a, it's almost like a meditation space for me. Like I just sit at the piano and I just kind of go for it and allow whatever comes out. And sometimes it's really noisy and atonal and chaotic, and then patterns will come out of that. And I really enjoyed that process. And I think increasingly I started to find that I was starting to write pieces and even able to do things with the piano that I don't feel like I can do with guitar, like ways that I could write music that I don't think I like. The I don't know, the process of like the connection between like my brain and my heart's instincts and like how it comes out of my hands felt a lot more direct. And I feel like with guitar has been really good for working with other people's music. I mean, I've certainly written stuff for guitar on my own, but I think that like working with Dave's songwriting, for example, like guitar was always like a really like I felt very a lot more ease doing that. But somehow writing my own stuff, piano just increasingly became like the thing that really connected with. And I don't know. Yeah, I just really love it. It makes me really happy. It's sort of like, I mean, I have a piano in my house and a piano in my studio, both free pianos that I just, didn't pay for and just picked up. But I love them both a lot and spent a lot of time with them. So
Now, did it take you a while to get them in tune and stuff, or did you keep it with its own weird tuning?
no, I tune them regularly, and I have like a guy that I know who's a piano tuner in Baltimore. I don't fuck with trying to tune it myself. I actually have been meaning to get a tuning tool so that I can both like maybe mess around with some sort of like uh slightly modified tunings, but also as much just because sometimes when the piano slips a little bit, it's like I don't want to have to like, like pay for the tuner to come. And if I'm just like, oh, I can just kind of tell this note's a little out, like I want to be able to fix it, but I just haven't taken the time to get the tools. So no, I play it in standard tuning. I mean, if I had the money and like the whatever, I would totally like want to get a piano that's like, like well tempered, and another one that I could like go really crazy with. And I'm totally the kind of like crazy person that if I had the money would have like I have six different pianos and they all do different things, but I don't have the space or the money, so I don't do that.
Yeah, so you have your own recording space in Baltimore. Did you
Mm-hmm.
start building that stuff from the ground up, or did it kind of come with like some stuff to start working with?
Yeah, no, just built it up from my own. I mean, I've always been really interested in recording. I mean, all four of us have for sure. But I mean, going like I said, going back to being 12 or 13 and getting a hold of like a, cassette multi-track. It's always been something I've really liked doing, and I remember getting like early versions of like Logic software in like the early 2000s before it was like bought by Apple, and I've just always kind of like been interested in that process and would jump. I tried to kind of like have a studio after high school, like kind of during high school and post high school, sort of built a studio around like a 8-track ADAT and got like a
Yeah.
Mackie mixer and some basic mics. And then when Noah wanted to record Young Prayer, like I recorded that, and that was 2001 or something like that. And so I've just always really been into it. And I think starting through kind of the 2000s, especially like working on Feels and Strawberry Jam and Centipede Hurts, I really started to realize that I was when we were in studios, I was really paying attention to what the engineers and producers we were working with were doing, and really like watching like their processes and stuff, and just kind of absorbing as much of that as I could. And um, when Dave asked me to help him record down there, that was, I think, really like a huge kind of blossoming moment for me of starting to be like, I really love doing this, like working on a whole record and really from beginning to end, like thinking through and like preconceiving and then seeing like how things evolve of like how do we want this to sound and how do we get those sounds and what do we discover along the way and how do we like polish it and get to that place. Like I really love everything about that whole process. And I found, yeah, working on down there especially was like this really like, oh my god, like I made a record, like I think this thing sounds incredible. And I mean, Dave and I did it together, but it was like a really meaningful thing. And then I think as the teens progressed and I got more and more opportunities to do that, mostly working on either my stuff or there's a record by an artist that this Tickly Feather. I don't know if that's on your radar, but she was on when we had that label Paw Tracks. Dave and I kind of co-produced that record for her, even though it only came out a couple of years ago. Getting to work on Eucalyptus with Dave,
Right.
getting to work on like some AC stuff that I've done a lot of kind of like the mixing of on the back end. Another like an EP of Dave's, and so it's something that I just really love doing, and I've, for better for worse, kind of have gotten the disease probably starting. especially kind of around 2013, 2014 of starting to really, well, no, I guess working around down there, it was like I was like starting to like buy microphones and having like a good computer system and getting a good like analog to digital converter and just starting to kind of like build things up. And it's kind of all been homegrown. And I mean, my studio in Baltimore right now is just a single room. It's like it's not like I have like a studio, but I do a lot of stuff in there. I've recorded some other people in there, and I do a lot of mixing for other people in there, and kind of producing in there. And um, yeah, like local people in Baltimore that I've been working on stuff with, and film score work that I've been doing in there. But it's just kind of like a really, I don't know, crazy hybrid space with like a lot of like analog preamps and old, delays and reverbs and stuff. And then like my computer setup, obviously being like a pretty big part of it. As much as I would love to be an analog person, I do most of my work working in a box. Yeah. So just been,
Would you,
collecting mics and audio gear for a long time and just enjoy using it.
would you say that you minimalize some of those pedals and stuff that you used to use back in the day?
Minimalize them? How do you
Yeah.
mean?
Like, oh, like this pedal does everything that these three pedals do whenever I put them together, so you just get rid of the three or something like that.
No, I'm a unfortunately a kind of a pack rat when it comes to gear. I actually have a lot of gear that I should get rid of because I don't really use it anymore. But it's some things it's like I definitely have nostalgia. There's like delay pedals, and I'm like, these were the delay pedals I used on Strawberry Jam. I don't want to like, I don't use them anymore, but like I don't, maybe I will someday. So there's that kind of stuff. And then there's also just I think especially doing a lot of like working on records both of my own and other people's, it's surprising how often you're kind of like trying to get a cool sound and you just go to a shelf and just grab some pedal you haven't used in a long time and plug it in, and it ends up like giving you a texture or a shape to something that you wouldn't have found otherwise. And so I like having that stuff around as like a kind of a Swiss Army knife of like yeah, no, I think I have like the disease. My pedal boards are always like bigger than everybody else's pedal boards on stage. And yeah, I try to. I want to minimalize, but I'm really bad at it. Noah is like the opposite. Noah is like he wants to like he's like what he wants is just to walk on stage alone and be like he can do everything. So if he can just be like, all I need is this microphone and a tom, like he's happy.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, I
Must
want
be
three
so good.
synthesizers and like three pedal boards, and five guitars, and it's a little ridiculous. They both have their pros and cons. I envy him, and I don't think he
Yeah.
envies me. But sometimes I'm glad I do what I do. So I don't know.
Yeah, the sound design I think is an important, crucial thing in every aspect of music. So I was gonna get into like what's some of the music that you've seen live younger that you were like, oh, I could do something like this too.
Oh man, live. Well, this I'm like not answering a question. I'm answering a different way. But there was definitely records I remember hearing at a certain age that weren't necessarily like, oh, I can do this. Well, there was the two sides to it. There was the I can do this too, which was like there was definitely like early Beck records and Pavement records. They were things that you were like, I understand how this happened. I actually like I can go from my like, 4-track like cassette player to that, and I get how that worked. And so it felt accessible. And I think like that era of indie music and that sense of kind of like people being able to like indie labels having actually just being small things that were run out of somebody's home or something, but they would work with artists that were fairly low selling artists. But also the idea that you could like press up CDs and get a small amount of distribution, which like I would, we were able to do when we were really young. So I think that there was that side of like seeing that it was like, oh yeah, we like this is accessible. But then there was also, I think, a tier of records and like things that come to mind are like first experiences hearing Can, first experiences hearing like the Silver Apples.
Yeah.
I was actually recently thinking about this record called it's by a group called White Noise. The record's called An Electric Storm, and it's like a late '60s record that was a weird kind of super group that included Delia Derbyshire, who I don't know if you know
Oh,
who she is. She was like an early she worked for BBC Radiophonic Workshop, but she's like an early like synthesizer and like tape manipulation kind of wizard that like really kind of changed the game in a lot of ways. And so they made this record that's like this really bizarre hybrid of like it's really trippy, but it also has these like really kind of like poppy, catchy moments, but also goes out into like crazy tape loop experimentation. And I think hearing stuff like that was sort of like what um I don't know, like when I was like first coming into sort of like being interested in popular music, a lot of my taste was based on just what I heard on the radio. And so there was a lot of groups that no disrespect to at all, but like, I liked the Smashing Pumpkins and I liked Pearl Jam and I liked Zeppelin and I liked just, it's like that was what was on the radio and it would give me a certain feeling and I'd be like, oh yeah, cool, cool, cool. But it also didn't feel, the more I kind of got exposed to sort of alternatives to that stuff, I started to actually feel like, oh no, now I'm hearing something that like actually like is mine or something. Like it doesn't just feel like this. I don't know if that makes sense, but so those are that I think like that introduction to recorded music is sort of almost like my answer to your question. I'm sure there are some really great examples of like things we saw live. I mean, there was a really like vibrant like young DIY music scene in Baltimore when we were like in high school. There was like a lot of people, some of whom I still see around Baltimore, who were like putting on shows and like community churches and that sense of like, oh, like we like myself and another like kind of high school bandmate who's like friends of all of ours, like we started a yearly like concert event at the high school that we went to that was like for bands, and it was like that hadn't happened before in our school, but we like really wanted to make it happen and it did happen. And so that was because we had been playing basement shows in Baltimore, and we're just like, yeah, this is like that idea that like we can make this happen felt really present. And I'm sure there was tons of bands that we saw during that era that made that feel possible. And not, I think not just the event making part of it, but like there was an early sense of like there were certain groups that certainly had like a style that you could be like, oh, like they're influenced by X, and that's very obvious. But I think there was also a lot of kind of things that started to be like, oh, this is somebody who's taking like three different ideas that seem like they shouldn't fit together, and they're doing something in like in front of an audience of 50 young people, but like it's
Right.
people are interested and their ears are open. And um yeah.
I have a fun question for you. So, if you were stranded on an island, but you could only take one thing with you, what would you take?
A piano.
A piano. All right.
Yeah,
So, if you had a time machine, would you go forwards or backwards?
I would go backwards.
To
Yeah.
what time?
uh well, this is an insight into my own psychology. I actually probably would just go back earlier in my own life and like readjust. I have like a nostalgic, regretful side to my particular depressive brain. So it's mostly would just be like, I want to fix some shit. That would kind of be what it
Yeah.
would be.
Yeah.
Um,
Nothing wrong with that.
yeah.
All right. So, here's one of the top ones. Okay. So, what would your last meal be? You could choose anything you want. It could be like a three-course meal.
Um, it would be, huh. I think a really good slice of pizza, or like a few really good slices of pizza.
New York's
A
got the
good,
best.
it does generally, yeah. A good pizza. Um, some sort of um, like I really like like a berry pie or crumble kind of dessert with ice cream. I actually had that last night and enjoyed it quite a bit. Uh, and I feel like there's some really important thing that I'm gonna be like, of course, you love that. Why wouldn't you have said that? Yeah, pizza and blueberry crumble. That's what I want, and ice cream.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your favorite ice cream then? I go for strawberry.
Honestly, these days, and it's not been like this forever, but I've recently just I really do love vanilla ice cream. I know that's the most boring vanilla answer that you can give, but it's really good. When it's good, it's fucking perfect.
Yeah, now's a perfect time for it. Yeah, so like I guess this one's a kind of an interesting one too. So Like, would you rather be born knowing everything, or would you rather be born like how you have to navigate to learn certain things? Would you rather have the knowledge starting out?
It's a really interesting question. Um, I think, well, it's interesting for me just because I think a lot of my regret stems from this idea, like a very classic, like if I knew then what I know now, I would like have done things differently. So that makes me want to say I want the knowledge to begin with. But I also feel
Right.
like so much of my life has been built around the idea of discovery being this like incredible edge to live on, like and wanting that. So I feel like I wouldn't want to give up that that potential. Like if you knew everything, then you would never get to kind of be in a state of discovery. So I guess I'm gonna go with that. I guess I'd rather be able to leave the state of discovery as a possibility, though it's riskier, I guess.
All right, so here's a classic one. Okay, so for the people that never listen to your music, how would you best describe it to them?
Is this my music or Animal Collective's music? I mean, they're
Your
kind of the same, but
kind
my
of the
music.
same, but your music specifically.
Um, I guess it's music that tries to speak to and or awaken certain kind of like emotional or spiritual states, both through lyrics and awareness of melody and also soundscape, and how to kind of like use those to evoke in an open-minded listener a state that they weren't currently in. I guess that's just because that's kind of the way that I find music to be the most powerful, whether that's music that makes me dance because I don't, techno being a great example, and like really good techno, it's just like it takes you over and you have to move, and
Yeah.
it takes you into an altered state. Or if you're talking about more, in my case, a lot of my music so far has been on the much more kind of introspective and, kind of dealing with psychology and grief and personal process. But it's like I think that when I'm writing a lot of that music, and I feel like with certain music that I listen to, I know it's hitting the right place when it starts to make me feel something that came from somewhere other than me, like choosing to feel it or something, like a lyric that comes out or a certain combination of sounds and melody and whatever that like evoke like a heart swelling or some sort of feeling like that. So I guess I try to make music that does that. I hope it would do that for other people. I'm sure it doesn't for a lot, but it seems like it does for a few. So that's cool.
Now, one of my favorite things about what you've done specifically are your remixes and stuff. So I kind of
Oh,
wanted to
thanks.
ask you about like what inspired you to do something different outside of like the classic recording bands and working with bands.
Well, the first one I think I did was the Ratatat remix.
Yeah.
Um, and that one in some ways came out of like that was an era of, I was not like actively in the touring, like I wasn't part of the Merryweather aspect of Animal Collective at that moment, which was obviously a really huge thing, and was, I felt pretty challenged not being part of that. There were other things we were working on, but it was sporadic and very much based on like when those guys were on tour or not on tour. And so I think I was in a state at that point where I was so kind of like desperately looking. I knew I needed to be making my own thing, but it was so hard for me to do it. And I think we got an offer to remix that track, and both because it was money, and that's how I work, and so I needed the money, but also I felt like it was like gave me an opportunity to work on a project where I could finish and complete a piece of music, but there was guardrails to it and some sort of like limitation. And it wasn't me going like I could write anything. It was like, no, you have to take these sounds and do something with them. And so I think it gave me like an opportunity to work on something almost like with training wheels, I guess is a weird way to put it, but that's the truth. That's kind of like part of why I said yes to that. Was I was just like I got to do something. And so I think I just found over the years that that's usually how I've used remixes. Increasingly, it became things where I would, a lot of my remixes, like I end up writing sort of my own song on top of it. And it's the same kind of thing. It's like I might be really struggling with being able to, you know, follow through with all the decision making that I would need to make to finish one of my own songs. But here's an opportunity to like work on something, and suddenly I hear a melody, and it like the stakes are kind of lower in a weird way in my mind. Like they're not necessarily for the artist I'm doing it for, but I think in my head it's like it's the pressure is different or something. So yeah, I don't know. It's just been a way to like exercise, I guess, in a way. That's how I see it. And oftentimes they've come at really like opportune moments in my life where like I've kind of needed something to give me a little bit of a spark, or to remind me that like, you know, like I might be sitting on, you know, whatever. I'm in some ways I'm sitting on like 30 different songs right now that aren't, you know, finished, but they're getting close. But a remix might come in and it's like an opportunity to, both in a good and a bad way. It's also sometimes a distraction. But anyway, it's yeah, it's a thing that I can kind of like very quickly just be like, okay, here's the tracks, like just start making something cool with it. And I get to yeah, practice being an engineer and practice being a producer, and oftentimes end up kind of practicing writing a song.
Now,
Yeah.
one of the artists that I got to see recently, they played out at at El Corazon with their Ariel Pink Period Bomb. They said
Oh yeah, yeah.
Cammy said every time that she got to hear you play, I guess she had like a practice space in Baltimore that she'd be very interested in what you do and like try to use that like influence and stuff, or what she would do to up her game and focus on, because I guess you were very good at always staying on top of working on your music when it came down to it. So I was like, that's very awesome, you know, because
Yeah, that's cool.
yeah, and also one thing I wondered, like, what also drives your practice? Like, what are the things that you like to focus on whenever you work on music before we go?
Well, first of all, I mean, I guess you're not going to see her, but yeah, I mean, Cam and I actually like lived in the same house for a period of time when she lived in Baltimore. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, her and DJ were definitely like part of my circle for a minute. So that's sweet to hear that she felt that way. I don't know what drives my practice. I honestly still feel like I'm trying to sort of develop it. I think I've just been trying to I think on its most essential level, as boring as it is, it's actually just been working on that muscle to show up for it, regardless of what my feeling state is. Because I think when I was much younger, it was like if I was feeling bad, I just would stay away. And I think that I started to realize that was making me sick, you know, in a weird way. So I think that just realizing that it's kind of as important as like eating or staying hydrated, like I just need to engage with the practice. And I think that what that practice looks like is often dictated by the projects that I'm working on, you know. So it's like working on Noah's record for the last 4 or 5 months. That's been most of my energy when I'm in the studio. So I've been less engaged with like, um, well, I've been playing piano a lot because I'm working on all my songs right now too. I don't know. I guess I try and like stay in some sort of hybrid place that's both like a very focused, predetermined, like I'm going to go in and work on the following projects, and I need to make sure I check off certain boxes because I want the projects to move forward. But I also do very much believe in a certain type of organic. You need to kind of allow your energy to be shifted when it's like needs to be or trying to be. So I try and just sort of be open, I guess, but just not lose sight of like what the there's always usually one or two like goals, like I need to finish this record, or I need to write this song, or I have to get ready for this show, or I have to like work on this film score. So those things I try and keep as like my guideposts, while at the same time allowing myself to kind of shift based on how my I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if
Also,
that's a helpful answer, but
one other thing before we go. Thank you for taking this time to join Vibe Osmosis. But do you have any advice for the people that are also starting out there with music?
I think the most important thing is just to do things that feel um, they feel like they're calling to you. But it's that, and I know we're about to get cut off. I used to do a lot of acting when I was younger, and I was very conflicted about it. And I had a very important acting teacher in my life who loved my acting tell me that the only reason to keep acting was if I could not imagine my life without acting, which is what allowed me to stop acting because I was like, oh, I actually can. But music is something that I can't. So it's like, I think there's a calling in it that I think it's important to pay attention to. And if it's really a genuine calling, to do it. But also, if it's not, I think I sometimes do see people who like suffer over doing a thing that is not necessarily what they need to be doing. And I think that type of suffering is, you could avoid it because